Hello, I'm Daniel Ortiz, and welcome to American Dream Latin Souls, where we share the untold story of Hispanic business success. Today, my guest is Joseph Sisneros, who is the owner and the executive director of the Rancho Chimayo Collection and Galleria.
Exactly.
All right, I'm glad I got that out. Right, you can tell us what that means. So, Joseph, welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Very excited to have you on our program. You are part of the traditional Northern New Mexico Hispanic. The family goes back generations.
Yeah.
So we want to learn about your family history and the family business. But before we do, Joseph, tell us, what is your American dream and what does it mean to you?
Well, my American dream is always meant to have an opportunity to express the things that I love, whether it's in the arts, which I've done and I do now, and also in business, without any kind of major hindrance like you see in a lot of other countries. So,
what I'm hearing is freedom.
We have total freedom here. And the only limitation I think there is on ourselves. From going back generations with my father and my grandfather and great-grandfathers and what they did with the opportunities they had. And I just have been able to carry that forward as best as I can.
Okay, so tell us what does that look like now? You have several businesses and you combining business and art in a way. Yeah. So tell us, what is it that you do and what is the business that you own?
Well, the main business I have is a Native American and Spanish colonial art gallery. I started when I was 12.
Okay. And that's by the way, that's the pattern of true entrepreneurs. We start small.
Yeah.
So I think we got some pictures of your gallery coming up here.
Yes, this is our main pottery collection at the location at the Rancho de Chimayo restaurant.
Okay. Now, is that part of your family business?
Yes. Well, it's not my personal business, but it's my family. The building was my great-grandfather's house, which was built in the late 1800s. But we're now 13 generations on that land.
13
with
generations,
my daughter,
wow.
yeah.
Okay.
And that goes back to about 1680-ish.
Wow.
And this used to be the corral. This room actually
Is that right?
built in 1905, yeah.
Okay. So now it's a gallery.
I was fortunate enough to have an invitation to come up from Santa Fe in 1990 by my aunt and my cousin and open up the gallery that I have. So we reinforced the inside of the building with those bancos there. Were actually just rock and mud, foundation exposed. So my cousin and I got some solid concrete and reinforced the foundation from the inside ourselves and created bancos and a display area, which also strengthened the building.
Now, I understand that earlier you mentioned that one of those pieces you actually created yourself. Wasn't it?
Well, I designed it. Part of my gift is I was raised in portrait art because my mother was a painter. And I don't have the skill that these phenomenal potters have. So what I did is I was able to draw designs and sometimes create something that had never been done and have one of my potters do it or one of my jewelers do it, but it's still their work. I just have a touch of influence on it, but for the most part, they do most of their own beautiful things.
Okay. So what's the scope of your business?
Well, our business is mostly directed at those that love art, Native American art, and want to know about the history, the process.
So it's an actual gallery then
yes,
as well?
Yes, it's a physical gallery.
Okay.
We have 2 locations at the restaurant, one for jewelry and paintings, which is a very small collection, but it's very refined pieces. And then that building, which is for the pottery collection. Okay.
Now, you made a distinction earlier between an owner of a gallery and I forget the term.
A director?
A director, and you are owner and director.
Owner, director, yeah.
Okay, so what's the distinction?
Well, an owner of a gallery can be anybody that owns a gallery but is never there. It's just like owning any business, having some kind of stock in something. When you're a director, you're the one that's actually running the whole operation. You're not only hiring and training, but you're also doing the buying and supplying, and you're actually creating the market and working with not only with the customers but working with your staff and the artists. That's my definition of what I do as owner, as a director. I'm owner also because it's my business.
So you wear multiple hats because the job duties, if you will, of the owner and what they're focused on are different from what you do as far as being in the day-to-day part of the in art. You know, and Santa Fe is, I think, what, the third largest art market in the country after New York.
It's, I think
it's up there.
I think it's second.
Second?
It's changed off and on, but it's
Okay.
up there in the world.
But I mean, for the city, our size, I mean, it's
Yeah.
a huge market for art.
Oh yeah.
And art is a tricky business. I mean, you can't not anybody can go into the art business. I mean, there's a whole different game there going on. So, where do your buyers come from?
Well, you know, the majority of our buyers come from out of state, actually.
So tourists that come to the Santa Fe?
Yes, but these people, not all of them, but a lot of these people come from different places over and over, or they have houses here, or they just fall in love with Santa Fe or northern New Mexico, or whatever aspect they fall in love with, whether it's a spiritual aspect or the topography or the history that we have. And of course, the art is so unique.
Well, they call it the land of enchantment for a reason, right?
It's true, yeah. Yeah, it's true. So, but I do have a great deal of collectors or people that want to get into having something created for them locally too, which is awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you get into this business? I mean, was it part of the family business? I mean, you said your family goes back generations,
Yes.
as a lot of Hispanics do, but...
Well, I started, my first job started at the Rancho de Chima restaurant as a
Okay.
dishwasher. I always had this love and passion for that house. I remember probably in my diapers being in that building before it became a restaurant. Because my great-grandfather died in 1959, Edmund and Hilda Jaramillo. And I just always wanted to be there. So my godfather, my dad's brother, Arturo Jaramillo, and his wife, Florence Jaramillo, who has the restaurant now, who owns the restaurant now, called me up when I was 12. And I was so happy. I didn't care what I did. And that's why
I got a job for you?
I got a job, and it's
do you have any
dishwashing.
ideas dishwashing?
I was like,
Were you thinking like chef or?
well, I wanted to be like a busboy, you know, because I got to go out there and
Okay.
kind of, you know, I wanted to be in the public.
Oh, I see.
Because my uncle was always in the public eye, and I always just admired that. But no, you said this is where you are, and it was nice. I liked it, but then I learned everything from busing to waiting to work in the gift shop and then as I grew older in college, bartending and you know all these things. As far as that goes, the business of the Native American art started when I was 12 through I call my second father, Don Ortiz. And he was quite the entrepreneur.
And he had, I think, Don Juan's was at his
Don Juan
shop?
Gifts and Gallery.
Okay, I remember. Yeah. Don. Yeah.
And his son is my closest friend, Dr. Donald Ortiz now.
Okay.
He's in Albuquerque. So he was so busy with all the things he was doing. He had Don and me run his shop at Santa
At 12
Plaza.
years old?
Yeah, 12.
Okay.
And I just loved it. I loved selling. I loved relating, and I loved the jewelry he had.
So would these tourists or these high-end customers come in? Would they take you seriously as this 12-year-old kid selling them?
I think they did.
This
Yeah,
piece?
yeah, because I would sell.
Because you would sell.
He would come back and look. Whoa, you know.
Yeah, that's great training, and we talked about our guest earlier, and I mentioned that virtually every entrepreneur that sits in that chair, there's been dozens and dozens, and even before that in my consulting career, the pattern for entrepreneurs is they're either starting a business young or they're working young, whether it's washing dishes or cutting weeds or whatever it is, but that first taste of earning money.
Remember, we kind of shared this before. My mother had brought this up to me because I had forgot about it. She remembers when I was sitting out in front of our house. I was 5 years old, and I had a sign. And we laughed.
Was it lemonade?
No, I was selling dirt cheap. And that's
Oh,
what
you
it
told me
said.
about that.
It said dirt cheap. And we had this beautiful red clay in this little arroyo behind our house, and I thought it was beautiful. So
I remember my grandpa on my mom's side had there was a big tractor and a big pile of dirt, but it was clay, and it was like fascinating. When you're that age, that's fascinating.
Oh yeah, and it makes good wads when you're throwing it at your friends, So
you actually were selling dirt cheap,
and my mother
at 5 years old.
She still laughs about it now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I sold anything or not. I don't remember.
You should have tried to sell it.
Yeah, but I tried.
Well, I sold paper airplanes when I was 5 years old. I think I told you that story. We had contests. This was before gadgets.
Yeah.
So you had to make your own entertainment, and boys, we compete with. But I think my family was the only family in the neighborhood that had Life magazine. So big glossy, and they had these paper airplanes made out of typing paper, small. So the big glossy paper airplanes from Life magazine. Of course, it just beat the heck out of everybody. So they all wanted one. I sold it, you know. And then I had my little sister selling them door to door. So, and that's what I'm going to ask you and ask a lot of my guests is: do you believe that entrepreneurship can be taught, or is it a mindset? Is it something that you just were born with?
You know, honestly, I can only speak for myself, but I think you're born with it.
Environment does play a factor because one of the other patterns is that a lot of entrepreneurs were influenced by their parents or grandparents or somebody in the family. That's not always the case. Like Bill Gates was not the case, or Jobs. So they were definitely born with it.
Yeah, I think you. Well, in my case, and I'm sure many others, I was always doing something to try to create some money for myself. Just something, because my father, we had a strong work ethic, and my father came from hard times like a lot of our fathers did, and this became extremely successful as one of the first Hispanic CPAs in Santa Fe.
Is that right?
Yeah, Joseph Sisneros CPA. And you know, I was so proud of my father, and see him a lot because he was working so hard in those days. And then just the whole thing. But one of the biggest things I think is you take what you learn from those that inspired you, whether it's your family or not. And I think it kind of blends into your own personality and your own gifts. And trying to find our gifts is something that it's hard. Yeah. You know, and some people don't find them till late in their life. That's right. Some people find it early on in their life and don't do anything with them. But when it finally hits, and in music, I also have a record company, but there's a thing called the pocket. And when you're in that pocket, it means everything is just gelling.
We call it in business the sweet spot.
The sweet spot too, yes. Yeah, the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and when you find your purpose in life and what your natural talents and abilities and your passion and timing sometimes, and when you hit that spot, and I think that this show is part of that. You know, Hispanic entrepreneurs nationally are growing faster, 4 times faster than the population at large. If you're Hispanic, if you're Latina, you're 6 times more likely to start a business. You know, there's over 30,000 Hispanic-owned businesses across the country with revenues over $1 million or more. So I'm thinking this is the sweet spot. But it's also, you know, in our culture in Santa Fe, you know, it's been going on for a while.
It has. You know, and the sweet spot to me is it can be a money part of it, but really it's when you're able to express your passion. We talk about that a lot, in a way that no one else can, and that's what kind of makes you an artist as well.
Yeah, your passion and unique gifts or talents.
Yeah, and everyone's different, and they're all beautiful and they're all special. There's no better or worse between another person. It's just it's the angle that people take. And I've trained many salespeople, and I always used to tell them, you know, listen to what I'm saying because of my experience, but put it into your language. You know, put it into your personality.
This is a unique talent, talking about the sweet spot, because a lot of artists, people who are gifted artistically, whatever it's music or pottery or art, whatever, generally frankly suck at sales. They don't, especially their own work. I mean, they're worst. But you have seemed to kind of turn that around, and I've always said, and it's true, you're your own best salesperson.
Right.
But artists, they tend to kind of shy away from that. So tell us about that.
Well,
talent.
That was one of the things I truly believe, and I think this is probably for most people in any kind of occupation, whether it's being a doctor, lawyer, whatever, and I'm sure it varies in percentage-wise, but in the art world, in my opinion, I think only 5 in 100 artists are prime, supreme best. And I think in sales it's almost the same. Someone that's just naturally able to express themselves and to communicate with their...
But that's where the passion comes in.
Right.
But so you can't fake passion.
Yeah,
you can't...
Yeah, you got it.
You know, and I think if you're in sales, if you're not the artist, whatever you're selling, if you're passionate about it, you're going to be successful, or at least
and not having
that's
fear.
A tool.
Not having fear.
Oh, that's a whole different category.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the word no doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You know, I mean, loss is not bad. You grow from that.
Well, let's switch tracks a little bit and talk about some of the challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur and overcoming fear, because fear is a big part of it, and that's why a lot of people don't go into business because of that fear factor. Yeah. And you got to face your fears. But then after that, you know, you had a different path early in your life, and we're going to talk about that. was a spiritual path, which ended up, you ended up in Rome of all places, but we'll talk about that. But let's talk about some of the challenges you've had as an entrepreneur and how you overcome them.
A couple things. One, when I first started my business, I had hardly anything in my pocket, money-wise. And
well, you know, that's
yeah.
kind of the
yeah.
that's kind of a prerequisite of being an entrepreneur.
I just had passion.
If we had money, we probably all went to business, right?
Really. So I remember my dad believed in me. He knew I wasn't going to be a CPA. Thank God. But he knew that I was talented with my love for people. And also being able to communicate and have no fear with people, not just selling, but communicating whatever it is I was selling. So I had an opportunity to start the restaurant, to start the business at the Rancho. And my father...
Which business was this?
What I have now, the gallery business.
Okay, and you were how old?
I was, I think I was 28.
Okay.
28. So he loaned me $5,000. And with that, I had to buy merchandise. I had to promote artists, rent, everything with that. And one of the things I learned from my mentor, Don Ortiz, was how to buy correctly, not just spend, but how to be practical about it. And then, of course, I had this eye for beauty, and so I was really having to weigh things. And first day, I sold a $600 buckle. I can still remember it today.
What did you buy? What was your cost?
Oh, man. It was probably like 200, let's say.
Okay.
I don't remember now, but...
So you
but
tripled your money on the
yeah,
deal.
it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge. So
so you remember that day? And that was your first day?
And I remember she was Filipina. Yeah, really sweet lady, though.
Uh-huh.
So...
Well, you know, it's funny. I remember as a stockbroker in college, I started for 3 months, didn't sell anything, and I remember my first sale was a guy I mean, you always remember your first, you know, and it was $5,000 this guy sent me from Oklahoma, never met me, never knew me, but I sold him on a cold call, and man, everything changed.
It's party time.
Well, it's the whole world opens up. It's like, this thing actually can work, right? It's that validation, like, okay, this thing that I'm in does work.
And what was nice is I had the support
So
of my family.
let me finish the story. You had yours on the first day.
Yes.
It took me 3 months to get my first sale.
Well, you had more perseverance.
Oh.
I just got lucky. But, and it just started happening. And I just put the talents I learned from my uncle Arturo, and how he was a senator from New Mexico, how he was with people and how people just loved him. And I put what I could get from him in my life in terms of communicating to the customers. So I was in the restaurant business, it's a service-oriented business. You have to cater to them at all costs. They're always first. And I got that always from him. So I was able to do that. And then, of course, what I learned from Don Ortiz in terms of the kind of the business part of it. And then my father with the integrity of business rules and practices and things like that, because you know, there's a lot to it.
Sure.
That was what just got it going, and it just kept going and going and going. So I started growing. So within 2 years.
And you were doing just jewelry at that time?
At that time, I was doing just jewelry and some pottery, and I had a very small building. Then the building up on top that you saw where all the pieces were, my aunt said, "You want that building too?" I said, "Yeah." So within 2 years, I expanded, and it just kept growing exponentially.
Wow.
Then I built a house that I designed. And then within 3 years, I purchased the business from Mr. Ortiz in Santa Plaza, expanded the business there, hired my aunt, who I love so much, and grew, and I started expanding, right? The idea was not only to promote the artists and get a market for them, that was one of the biggest reasons why I went in, to create a voice for our artists, especially Native American artists, because culturally it's not that simple to just talk about what they're doing.
Right.
And as an artist in general, it's not easy for an artist to express.
Well, our culture does hold us back. I mean, Hispanics tend to be, I know Native Americans also, but Hispanics tend to be humble. I mean, I have an article I'm writing, which is titled, "Why There Will Never Be an Hispanic Donald Trump." It's not because of his wealth. I mean, he's not even the richest man in America, but because of his mouth. You know, Donald Trump would be, for an Hispanic mother, would consider him a sinvergüenza. Because, you know, the bragging, the mouth. And so that kind of holds back, I think, as Hispanics. Because sometimes in business world, you have to stand out.
Yeah.
But yours, you know, you're to have the type of business where you have that personal connection because people come to you and you can engage directly.
Right. And it's a fine line. And that was one of the things that I found very successful for me. And that's why.
Or do you promote your business? Or does it just?
No, we promote it, but most, you know, it's like the Rancho Chima. I mean, it's been coming into our 50th anniversary as a restaurant this year. And it's been written about by more than half the newspapers in the country and in magazines and whatever.
It's famous, yeah.
But it was word of mouth.
Well, see, but what I'm seeing is that as a marketing, it's a brilliant marketing strategy because the restaurant brings in the people, and then they see the people see the jewelry, so that's a built-in traffic.
The whole idea for me was we had when I first expanded there because I was working for Don at the time, managing his gallery, and then I went to the restaurant. We already had our unique New Mexican food came from my great grandma initially. We had the most beautiful building. Beautiful location, but we didn't have the art. The three things that we have in New Mexico that are so beautiful.
Okay. I see that.
And the history.
Yeah.
So that's why I knew it'd work. And it was scary. Because, you know, I had a pretty good paying job in Santa Fe. You know.
Risk. I mean, this is what entrepreneurs do. We take a risk based often on nothing more than a hunch or gut instinct or just what I call knowing.
Yeah.
You know, you can do all the market research you want, you know, but that doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, it was a hunch, wasn't it? But more than a hunch, you just knew, right?
I just knew.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
it's the knowing.
You know, and I did have some, you know, when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, I had the oldest house gallery. I renovated that for the Christian Brothers, plastered it, took all the conduit that was exposed outside the wall, put it into the wall, up to code. I had that location. I had Santa Fe Santa Plaza East, plus the Santa Plaza where Don had his shop.
So what I'm hearing is you have a lot of overhead.
I expanded it, right? And I had
and the recession
hired
hit.
and yeah, it hit. And they're all historic places where I was, plus the mother house at the restaurant. And things started changing, and it started getting harder and harder to keep everybody afloat. So I had to be smart about it and start eliminating costs, you know, eliminating cut. And I kept it going as long as I could, and I finally closed the Santa Plaza location in 2011.
This was the former Don Juan's gift shop from Don Ortiz.
Yes.
Okay.
And I am planning on going back again, but the timing was right.
Right.
And the way I look at it is like...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think 80% of the galleries in Santa Fe, went under or just cut back.
Even before that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big turnover there anyway. But I mean, they took a huge hit.
Yeah, art business is not as simple. It's a commodity of... It's not a commodity, but...
When times are tough, art is like one of the first things to go, right?
People don't need art. Yeah, you need to eat, you know.
Right.
So, but...
Right. You need to pay a mortgage.
You do. So I looked at it like being a captain of an ocean liner that was really cruising great. And all of a sudden I'm sinking, you know.
Right.
But I'm still cruising right now, and we're fine.
Okay, so you kind of shed some of the excess, and you still... So what are your core businesses now? And then I want to segue into the path that you almost took, or you took.
Well, the core business are the two galleries at the Rancho de Chima restaurant.
Okay.
And that's really the core right now. So I'm just, and then I have more time with my family, and so it works. But I will be looking out elsewhere again.
Okay, so early on in your life, you took a different path, a spiritual path, and you told me this story earlier. I mean, you actually ended up in Rome.
I did. Yeah.
And you had an audience with Mother Teresa, so we definitely want to get that in. So tell us about that path in your life.
At the time I was in the business school at the College of Santa Fe.
You were how old?
I was 19.
19, okay.
I was 19, 20. I was a freshman.
Now we have a picture of you. This is you in Rome?
Yeah, this is me. My first year as a freshman at the college I went to, which was the Angelicum University, which was actually the headquarters of the Dominicans in the world. It's where John Paul II got his doctorate degree.
Okay.
And I entered in as a junior in the philosophy program, because my path at that point was preceded by what I would call a calling to my faith, to my Creator, and I wanted to know about how my Catholic faith was truly on all levels, especially on the intellectual and historic level, so I could be so if someone says something, I could actually gently steer them correctly.
So you felt early as young, I guess, young men who entered the priesthood, you felt a calling to go into the priesthood?
My calling was dual. It was learning my faith as it was and growing in my spirituality with Christ through my faith, and at the same time, that road leading to the possibility of becoming a priest by going through the educational process that any priest would have to go through. So that year when I was there, I was a lay student with the International Study Program. I was the youngest in my program, and there was 12 of us from all over the United States. It was headed by Father Royce Hughes, who was a professor at Loyola and Notre Dame, and he accepted me in his program. And I got in, had to do some core classes here to catch up to that in that summer just to get into that program, so I did.
Well, we talked about this before, is people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize that to become a Catholic priest, I mean, you have to have some intellectual muscle behind you. You don't just, you know, one day get some holy water sprinkled on you and voila, you're a priest. I mean, you have to study, you have to, I think you said you have to have a degree.
Yeah, but they have to have an undergrad degree, number one. Then you have to go to theology. They have probably the equivalent of a master's minimum.
Okay.
To be just to be a simple priest.
And you were on that path.
I was in an undergrad program.
Okay. So we got just a few minutes left. So you went to the program. You were at the school in the Midwest with the University of Loyola?
No, I was in Rome, but the head of the program in Rome was from.
Oh, okay.
He was a professor there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you lived in, it looked like to me a pretty ornate digs while in Rome. I think we've got a photo. I think this is probably the photo we have coming up is actually I don't know what, maybe you could tell us it's where they have a mass or what is it?
Oh, okay. That building was.
There we go.
Yeah, that's actually where I lived. That was the chapel.
That's the chapel.
Yeah, I mean, it was a monastery. The monastery was it's called San Giovanni e Paolo, and it was. So
you lived in a setting like this while in Rome?
That's where we went to mass every day.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's so beautiful. I mean, every church is so beautiful. But we rented out. Well, this is the second year I was in Rome, and I joined a religious community at that point out of Quebec, Canada. I was the only American. There was 36 brothers, all musicians.
Is that right?
And that's where I got.
Oh,
I started in music when I was 14, but that's where I really got trained. And we used to go around and sing at the Vatican, at St. Peter's. They called us in to do high masses. But that, we're talking about Mother Theresa. Her monastery was...
Right, because we got like about 2 minutes left. So
yeah, her monastery was about 2...
So Mother Teresa has a monastery, and a lot of people, I didn't know this.
Yeah,
has
San
a monastery
Gregoriano.
in Rome. Okay.
It's the headquarters of the Sisters of, I think it's the Sisters of Charity.
Yeah.
And so, just to make the long story short...
So she was your neighbor, in a sense?
The sisters were, yeah.
But
when she came in, that's where she stayed.
Okay.
When she came in and addressed the Holy Father or a big retreat, because she was always way up on the list. That's where she stayed. And it's kind of, just to make a long story short, I was studying so hard for my finals. And I was just studying. And the brothers came in and just said, "You got to go now. We have a private audience with Mother Teresa." And I was like, no, I got to study.
Okay, private audience. I mean, is that just you and her, or
just her? Well, private audience meant her and just 6 of his brothers.
Wow.
In a small little room. So they literally dragged me out because I was intent on I had to study, and which I was so happy. So we go down the street because it was about 100, maybe 50 yards away, and we go into this little room. We're waiting, and she walks in, and she's very small, and it's like the room just lit up. I mean, spiritually, I could feel warmth. I could feel warmth heating through something miraculous. And she just spent some time telling jokes, and she was extremely funny, and she was very touchy. She was always touching us, and you know, and we would ask her questions about the Bible and ask her questions about Calcutta and working with the lepers, and she was She used to tell us things that I'll never forget.
Well, we're going to have to take that to the next
Another
story
time,
because
yeah.
we're out of time. But fascinating story, Joseph. I wish we had more
Yeah.
time to share your story. I'd like to thank you for sharing your story on American Dream Latin Souls and inspiring and following your calling, because I think you are still following that, that calling.
So working wherever it goes.
Very good.
Any thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on this edition of American Dream Latin Souls. Be sure to visit us online at latinosuccess.com.